Spyro the Dragon is a game I missed out on as a kid. This series flew largely under my radar because I was a Nintendo gamer and was playing platformers like Mario and Sonic. To me, Spyro was just one of the countless characters in the Skylanders series, and I had no clue that he had his own line of platformers. Eventually I figured it out, and even then I didn't have the means to play the old games. From 2008 to 2018, there wasn't a single Spyro game released, so during the formative years of my life, the series was dormant. Recently though, I decided to try out some old PS1 games that I completely missed out on. I played through Metal Gear Solid and then Spyro, and I fell in love with it. So much so that I dropped the other retro achievement sets I was making videos for to pick this one up. Oh, and if you're new, you might be asking, what is Retro Achievements? Well, it's a website that links to your retro emulator set Xbox 360/PlayStation 3 era-like achievements to your favorite classics. I've done a few videos on the website by now, so if you want to learn more after this video, check those out. But before I start playing, let me tell you about how I'm going to go through this achievement set. I'm going to go through this game as I usually would, beating every level until I complete the game. Once I do, I'm going to take a look through the set and try to collect the achievements that I missed. And by the way, when you hear this sound, that means I've collected an achievement, so check here to see which one it was. As the game starts, something to note about Spyro is that it's a collectathon game, a lot like your Banjo-Kazooies or Donkey Kong 64s. So most of the achievements have to do with getting every collectible in the game's 6 worlds. So this video might feel a bit more like a walkthrough at times, but just to be transparent, I'm not going to talk about each and every dragon, gem, or egg, because if I did, this video would be way longer than it already is. Starting up the game, we watch Gnasty Gnorc turn every dragon into a crystal and steal all of the dragon's treasure. It's up to Spyro to save the dragons. Starting in Artisans, we free the first of 80 dragons, Nestor, and he explains that we need to free 10 dragons in Artisans before we're able to proceed and move on to the next world. Before I go into the first level of each world, I like to collect all of the collectibles that each hub world has. Artisans is pretty straightforward. There are gems scattered around the floor, as well as trapped inside enemies. To defeat the enemies, you can either charge into them or use your flame breath to take them out. This hub world does an amazing job of teaching you the core mechanics of the game. In order to free all the dragons and collect all of the gems, you need to essentially use all of Spyro's moves. Like I mentioned before, defeating enemies is a big one, as well as using Spyro's gliding to reach a few otherwise out of the way platforms. The 4 dragons in Artisans are pretty easy to get. They're scattered around each section of the hub world in easy to spot places. They all give some helpful tips, but otherwise are pretty uninteresting. After exploring for a bit, I was able to collect the achievement for getting all of the collectibles in Artisans, and I moved on to the first level, Stone Hill. As you might imagine, since it's the first level in the game, Stone Hill is a lot like Artisans, in that it's super straightforward. This level is an open sandbox that you really just need to run around and explore. You do need to make sure to check pretty much every corner because there are likely gems hiding that you don't want to miss. In this level, there are 4 dragons, 200 gems, and 1 other collectible that we'll get into in a bit. Although the stage is pretty simple, there are a couple of things that can trip you up if you're not familiar with the stage layout. The first of which is the existence of this beach area that is right behind the stage exit. The little cave here holds the key to this stage's chest, which pretty much just holds a ton of gems. Speaking of the chest, that's another thing that might be weird to find. It's down this hole right near the start of the stage. The area also has a dragon that teaches you about the health mechanic of the game, Sparks the Dragonfly. Essentially, his color tells you his health, and as you get hit, his color changes, and then you can lose a life. In order to get your health back, you can defeat animals in the stages which give you butterflies to power Sparks back up. Once you get to the top of the tower, the dragon here indicates that you should try and glide onto the side of the stage. This holds the rest of the level's gems, as well as the final collectible type in this game, dragon eggs. For this one, you need to chase this thief, which is holding one. After I got that, I ran around for a bit trying to find the last of the stage's gems and got the achievement for 100% in Stone Hill. I returned to Artisans and then went on to the next stage on my list, Dark Hollow. Dark Hollow is the first time we find enemies that need to be defeated in a specific way. These enemies with shields have to be rammed into and can't be set on fire. And this giant guy with a club is the opposite. You need to use fire for him. This dragon that we save essentially tells us the same exact thing, and then opening this dragon got me the achievement for unlocking 10 total dragons. Another dragon as well as a key for this stage can be found deep inside this cave. Once I left the cave, I went back to the start of the stage for the chest, and I'd already completed all of Dark Hollow. This is one of the shorter stages in the game with only 100 gems and 3 dragons. With 100% of that stage done, I went over to the tall tower in Artisans to move on to the next level, Town Square. In my opinion, Town Square is the most complicated stage in Artisans. It has 4 dragons, 2 200 gems and an egg. And some of this stuff is kind of out of the way. The first dragon at the start of this level tells us once again how to glide, which is awesome because he's like the third guy to tell us how. Nevertheless, when you glide to the next portion of the stage, there are some gems to collect, as well as an extra life. And once you move on, another dragon tells you how to glide. But I guess his advice is sort of useful because he tells you that at the top of your jump, that's the best place to start your glide. This comes in handy when getting to this side portion of the level. Over here, there's a thief to chase who's carrying a dragon egg, who I was able to defeat on my first try. Continuing on at this side portion brings you through the back way to the end of the level, which is important since it has a dragon to help as well as a few gems. Now backtracking through the rest of the level, I was able to get the rest of the gems and the achievement for 100% in Town Square. Next up, it was time for me to do the first boss stage of this game, Toasty. Some of you who are knowers of Spyro might have noticed that I missed something in Artisans, but we'll come back later, don't worry. Toasty's stage can be pretty tough if you don't know how to deal with these dog creatures. By going into their aggro range and then running away, they will try to attack you by stomping on you, but they'll miss. It's at that point where you can pretty easily take them out yourself. Otherwise, the wizards don't pose much of a threat, and the start of this stage is a walk in the park. There is a little section off to the side here with a bunch of gems that can be easy to miss, so I made sure to go there and then free the one dragon in this level. He tells us to be careful during this fight. To fight Toasty, you essentially just need to get close and breathe fire on him. He doesn't really attack, so you only need to be careful with the dogs. After 2 hits, Toasty is revealed to be a sheep, and then you hit him once more to take him out. Not much to miss or collect here, so I 100% completed the stage. After Toasty, I was ready to move on to the second world of this game, Peacekeepers. And to get there, you need to talk to this hot air balloon guy, and he'll fly you right over. But before we get into Peacekeepers, I have to do the annoying thing where I ask you to hit those juicy like and subscribe buttons. Did you see them glow down there? I know you did. To be honest, these videos take a lot of work to do, so every like and sub helps motivate me to keep making these videos. But anyway, right away in Peacekeepers, there is a dragon for us to save who tells us stuff we already knew. The treasure is stolen, blah blah blah. The hub world itself isn't anything too crazy. The gameplay loop in this game is similar for every zone, but there are these enemies that shoot cannonballs as well as enemies that hide in these little tents. Where this hub world gets really interesting though, is how you need to use these cannons yourself to unlock treasure in extra areas in the zone. When you push the cannons and use your flame, you're able to shoot a cannonball yourself that can blow up chests and these rocks. By blasting the rocks, you can get over to a secret area that has another stage for you. We're gonna come back to this later though. Other than that, the section has 3 total dragons, 200 gems, and 1 egg. And that egg is over here with the last dragon and the key for the locked chest. Once I hovered over to this mine area, I was able to collect the last of the gems and 100% Peacekeepers. Once I was done here, I took myself over to Dry Canyon. In this level, you really need to keep your eyes peeled for sections off to the sides of the main path. The first of which goes behind this part of the canyon, and it has our first of the collectibles in this stage, a dragon egg. If you keep tight turns, it's not too hard to get. I used my glide to get onto this cliff over to the left here. In this area, there are a bunch of birds that fly at you, which is super different from the enemies we've dealt with before. These guys take flames to defeat. In this section, there's a dragon for me to collect, as well as a ton of gems. The treasure chest is also over here, but we don't have the key for that yet. While in this section, I actually got an achievement. The achievement was for getting 10 total lives. Going back to the main path, this dragon tells us that Dry Canyon rewards good gliding, which I think we already figured out. But using his hint, I noticed this area over here and went over to it. I also got another achievement for collecting 1,200 total gems in the game. With a good glide, I wrapped around the side to get the last dragon, as well as the key to the chest, which got me 100% in Dry Canyon. The next level I went to tackle was Cliff Town, which has these enemies that are standing by huge pots. My first time around playing this game, I didn't realize you had to shoot these pots with fire to get gems out, but I made sure to do that this time. And also, make sure to check for these fireworks. They shoot out and break chests that you otherwise can't open. There isn't too much going on in this stage. As long as you check every corner, you're likely to collect all of the gems and dragons until you get to the top. The only challenging thing on the bottom section of this level is the thief with the dragon egg. He's pretty fast and does a pretty tight circle, which can be super tough to grab. This egg also gave me the achievement for rescuing 5 total dragon eggs. Once you make it to the top, this dragon tells you to hover over to the top portion of the stage, where there are a ton of gems to grab, as well as the last dragon to free in this level. But once the last dragon is freed, there's still a lot more to get. There are chests and gems on the roofs of the houses, and I also managed to forget to grab the gems at the start of the level, but once I grabbed those, I was 100% done with Cliff Town. Next up was Ice Cavern, which has a really interesting section that we'll get to later. But for now, this stage is super linear. As you go through the level, saving 5 total dragons, there isn't really much for you to miss. Just make sure to ram into these light poles which have gems on top. There's only one section in the main portion of this level that you could consider a diverging path, but it's clearly spelled out for you by these gems. For going through this area, you're rewarded with a dragon, and then back to the main path you go. Earlier in the level, I forgot to glide over to this key, so I did that. I opened the chest, got all of the gems, and then went over to this super interesting part of the level. If you make your way back to the start, go over to this platform and float off to the right side around these ice pillars, there's a platform with 3 extra lives, which gives you an achievement. Next up is the first flight course that we're going to tackle in this playthrough, Night Flight. Technically, this is the second flight level in the game, but I forgot to go to the one in Artisans. Each course essentially has 4 objectives for you to do as a timer ticks down. In this stage, you need to fly through 8 floating rings, break 8 treasure chests, fly through 8 arches, and activate 8 lighthouses. On my first try, I failed, but this stage is very straightforward, and on my second go around, I did all of the objectives in one shot, which gave me the achievement for 100% completing Night Flight. I also beat it fast enough to get the speedrun achievement for the stage, which is nice. Since I was done with that, I moved on to the last section of Peacekeepers, confronting Dr. Shemp. Going around this level can get challenging because of these enemies that charge at you, but if you dodge or ram into them, they go down easily. We also have the pot ladies, but without the pot. I actually ended up losing a life in this level to one of the charging guys, which marks the first time I actually died in this game. After going to the top of the tower, you can glide over to this level's key. I then went to go and challenge Dr. Shemp to a battle, and needless to say, he was pretty easy to take out. 3 flames and the fight is over. After the fight and opening the treasure chest, I realized I actually forgot to fly over to this platform off in the distance of the first section of the level. So I did that and got 100% completion of Dr. Shemp and Peacekeepers as a whole. Going over to the balloon guy, we can move on to Magic Crafters. Magic Crafters is what I would consider to be the first actual interesting hub world of the game. Right off the bat, you need to save a dragon egg from this thief. There are a couple of gimmicks to this hub. The first one is that there are enemies that raise platforms so they become out of range of your attacks, so you need to be quick to fight them. There's also another dragon egg right at the top of this hill, which is dragon egg number 7 if you weren't keeping count. I mentioned there was a second gimmick to this hub world, and that's the supercharge arrows here. When you dash down them, you run at super high speeds. This allows you to get past the magician here, as well as open up this container in the world. This can be pretty hard to get because you need to have tight movement in order to get all of the way through the cave and break the container. Behind this building is the key for the locked chest, and the chest can be found by floating over off to the side here. With that, I was done with Magic Crafters. But before I moved on, I left and came back, which spawned all of the enemies back in. I collected 20 orbs from them and got an extra life, which gave me an achievement. Okay, I made a major mistake here, and I really do not know how this happened. I somehow, even though I ran past it multiple times, completely skipped what is supposed to be the first stage in this section of the game, Alpine Ridge. And I didn't notice until the very end of the playthrough. So, we're gonna have to come back way later for that. But right now, it's on to High Caves. This stage has a lot for us to collect. 3 dragons, 500 gems, and 2 eggs. And let me just say, this level itself is super interesting. Starting off, there are 2 paths you can take. One inside of this cave, and then the other one goes around this mountain here. I chose to stay outside. There's some enemies to take out, as well as a dragon before we can float over to these moving platforms. By defeating the wizards on top of them, it stops moving, and we can move on to the back side of the castle. In this room, there isn't much, just a couple of chests that lead you back to the main path of the world. Over here, we can go into the cave from the start of the level, where there are these huge bug creatures that are currently invincible. But if you make your way through the cave, there's a fairy that gives you a temporary upgrade to your fire breath that takes them out. After running around for a bit and defeating all of the metal bugs, I got an achievement and then moved back into the main part of the stage. Over here, we can make use of the supercharge arrows like we did in the main section of Magic Crafters. Using this, we can launch ourselves over to a few different parts of the level. There are a couple of caves, and then there's this section that you have to launch yourself over to. Over here, there's some gems and a dragon egg for you to collect. Once I was done with that, I flew over to these 2 areas of the castle. One had another egg and the other had our last few gems. Next up was Wizard Peak, which is a linear level. This is nice after the more sandbox style that High Caves had. But that's not to say that this stage can't be challenging. There are a whole bunch of supercharge ramps to take, some of which have jumps like this, which I'm not good at. I died a few times getting to this platform off in the distance, this, but once I made it over, there were gems and a dragon egg for me to grab. Back at the main part of the level, there was this container I needed to barge through, as well as a ton of enemies to fight. The next thing I needed to do was get over to this platform, which I died on many times because I wasn't getting all the speed I needed. But once I was there, I collected a lot of gems. Over on the main path, there was another egg to collect and a dragon to save. Now I needed to backtrack to the beginning of the level in order to take the back path around the castle. I don't know how, but I forgot about this section and ended up looking for a while before I found it. Once I did though, I collected the last of the gems and completed Wizard Peak. Now it was time to take on Crystal Flight, which really wasn't all too bad. I flew through some rings and arches, took out some planes, and then broke some chests, and I did it on my first try. Still don't know how I didn't notice that I only played 3 levels here and missed Alpine Ridge, but I still moved on to the boss level of this world, Blowhard. This one really isn't bad at all. You hit Blowhard and he unlocks a new part of the stage. There isn't really opportunity to miss anything along the way, so I made it through this collecting the 400 gems and 1 dragon super quickly. Now with 49% completion of the game and 25 out of the 65 achievements in the set, I went back to Artisans to do the flight level there. The way you get to Sunny Flight is pretty simple. What you need to do is step on all 5 of the rocks in the water by the waterfall, and then you get access to the secret room with the level. This also gave me an achievement, by the way. Sunny Flight can actually be pretty challenging. You need to have really good timing to break the barrels, while also having enough time to defeat all the planes in between. It's got some really tight timing. Once you do that, you need to get all the chests in the circular room and then fly through all of the gates. This one took me quite a while to do, but I got through it in the end and got the achievement, and it was time to move on to Beast Makers. Overall, completing the Beast Makers hub isn't really that bad. There are some interesting enemies here, like the ones that activate these electric floors and these hogs that charge at you, but everything is pretty much in sight for you to grab. The only thing is that the flight level and some of the gems are hidden down in this hole, which can be easy to miss. After running around for a bit, I found the key, got all of the gems, and was done here. At this point, I'm trying to kick it into high gear because this video is getting pretty long. The next place I took on was Terrace Village, which only has one notable part. Once you go through the stage defeating all of the enemies, getting gems, and freeing dragons, one of the dragons hints you to glide off into the distance. If you're paying attention, there's a section towards the middle that you can get to that has a whole bunch of fireworks to set off. This gives you the rest of the gems you need to beat the level. I actually missed some of the gems earlier on and was left searching for quite some time, but I got it done. I know I'm not spending that much time here, but don't worry, we'll be back in this stage later. Misty Bog is our next stop, and it has these goofy looking tree creatures that charge at you. It genuinely gets overwhelming because sometimes there are 4 to 5 of them attacking you at once. To take them out, you need to use your fire breath. One really fun part of this level is the line of armored enemies you can ram into right next to the alternate path. And the alternate path takes you through a huge hut with a ton of enemies inside, as well as one of the dragons you need to free. It's a pretty short section and it's really hard to miss anything. Back on the main path though, I got the achievement for collecting 6,000 total treasure. This main area gets super interesting. Once you beat all of the bad guys here, you can rescue this dragon, which gave me the achievement for getting 50 total dragons. And then you have to scale the building you just came out of. That brings you to this area where you hop across logs for the final few pieces of treasure in this level. Moving on to the treetops, this ended up being one of my favorite levels in the game just because of how fun a couple of sections here are. This stage has a bunch of different paths connected largely by supercharge ramps. If you're paying close attention, there are thieves running around the level, but they aren't there stealing eggs. They're here to show you how to get to hard to reach platforms in the stage. Taking this pathway, following the thief has you jump from ramp to reach this insane out of the way area. It's incredibly challenging, but satisfying to pull off. And it's the same with this section here, to get to the top of the exit. Otherwise, you just need to be careful to make sure you go to each section of the level to collect all of the gems and dragons. I checked out the next flight level, Wild Flight, and this one can be a challenge. The reason it's so hard is that there are 2 different sections you need to access in order to get each objective, all while needing to time yourself to be able to break all of the boats and airplanes. I chose to take the route with the boats and arches first, and then pivoted over to the plane and chest area. This one took me a bit, but eventually I was able to 100% this stage. My first playthrough of this game, Metalhead was one of the stages I needed to use a walkthrough for, and it's because of this part over here. After you clear everything in the main path, there's a secret platform down in this pit that leads to a good chunk of treasure. I don't know if I'm not observant enough, but my first playthrough of this game I got stumped here. The fight with Metalhead is actually pretty interesting. Instead of attacking Metalhead himself, you need to attack these posts that are powering him. You need to be careful not to hit them while they're electric though, and there are some out of the way gems that you might miss while going through the fight. Once you're done with that though, there's still more to grab. Near the exit, there's an updraft that lets you grab these gems as well as the gems outside of the building. We're getting decently close to the end of this game now, and although it seems incredibly repetitive, the gameplay loop is very fun. This is a great game to sort of turn your brain off to play, especially if you know where most of the gems are. The stages are fun, memorable, and the movement in the game also adds another layer of replayability. So I'm thoroughly enjoying this retro achievement experience. In Dreamweavers though, we only have 3 dragons and 300 gems to collect, so this one shouldn't take too long. There are a couple of gimmicks in this hub world. Some of the enemies change form as you get close to them with magic, and then there are these timer guys that when hit will move platforms for a few seconds. These platforms are usually used to get more treasure or reach different sections of the stage. Something fun about Dreamweavers is this part here. You need to defeat this enemy on this magic cannon and then use the cannon to hit these 2 guys that are blocking the way through to another section of the stage. When they're hit, they become smaller and you can barge through them. The Dreamweavers hub world is a fun one. The first actual stage I checked out in Dreamweavers was Dark Passage, which is genuinely pretty fun. There are 2 paths in the level, the main path and then a pretty extensive diverging path that we'll get to later. On the main path, there are 2 types of enemies that react to light. When they're in the dark, they become big and scary, but when you use the lantern guys to light up the section, they become small and hittable, which is a fun mechanic. There are also these creepy devil guys. They freak me out. But once you make it all the way to the end of the main path, you might notice these caves in the walls. By gliding over, you're opened up to a huge alternate pathway. It isn't really anything that special level design wise, it's just cool that this stage throws you off and essentially puts a whole other level inside of the level. At the end of this path, there's a firework you need to set off to get into the gem container. I somehow was missing 5 gems, so I had to go throughout the entire level again and figured out I had managed to not defeat one of the enemies. Next up, I checked out Lofty Castle, which is another level I really like. I think that the stage designs just keep getting better as the game goes on. Here, you need to travel to different sections of the level where you need to free these fairies, and the fairies bring you between the different areas. While doing so, you need to pop these balloon guys for gems. This was another thing I somehow didn't realize on my first playthrough of the game. Overall, it's pretty easy, and I don't feel like there's anything that noteworthy here. There is this super fun section where you need to glide and defeat balloon enemies around this castle though. Over here, I also got an achievement for gliding for 5 seconds and landing. But Lofty Castle was a walk in the park, which is a good thing. Not bad. I really like this game. When I was done with that, I went into Haunted Towers, which is a unique one. You get to get a powered up flame from these fairies again, and then you use that to defeat huge night creatures. There's a lot of backtracking to do in order to get all of them. Once you get into the castle area, there is one super challenging part of the level. Using the supercharge ramp, you need to pretty much maneuver your way around the whole outside of the castle, and things are pretty tight. I died a few times trying to get this one, but it was fun. Once I went through this upstairs tower section, I got the last of the gems and moved on. Now, it was time for the last traditional flying level of the game, Icy Flight. I mean, we've seen these before. This time around, we have 8 lighthouses, 8 treasure chests, 8 barrels, and 8 helicopter things. This one is definitely the hardest. You need to take a pretty specific path in order to get all of the collectibles, but it's not that bad in the end. The last thing to tackle in Dreamweavers is Jacques. Jakes? I don't know how to say his name. Which in my opinion has the most interesting lead-up sections to the fight. I mean, this boss stage has 500 gems for us to collect, so it's really an entire level in itself. It utilizes the clock guys that we saw in the Dreamweavers hub. You use them in order to access secret locations of the stage. And as usual, that path has a ton of gems to collect. This part where you glide down and attack these green dudes is pretty notable. This one ends up being pretty hard. The boss itself, though, is a huge nothing burger. He barely attacks you and you just follow him to the end of his little obstacle course, if you can even call it that. That is my only complaint about Spyro, really. The boss fights aren't as fun as I feel like they could be, but to be honest, it isn't that big of a deal. Now with 10,000 treasure, 11 eggs, and 70 out of 80 of the dragons, it was time to move on to the last world, Gnasty's world. And I have a confession to make. I actually stopped my original playthrough at this point, because I wanted to make a Spyro video, and I wanted to keep some of the game a surprise for myself. So from here on, it's actually a blind playthrough. Gnasty's world is a bit different. It isn't actually possible to get all of the gems before tackling the world, because some of the gems are trapped inside of these dragon heads that only open when you complete the levels. So I got what I could and went on into Gnorc Cove. I thought that this being the last world, these would be some of the toughest, more sandbox style levels in the game, but for Gnorc Cove, I was wrong. This actually ends up being pretty linear. There is a fun mechanic where you knock barrels into enemies and use TNT to break chests, but if you're playing with your eyes open, it's pretty hard to miss any gems or dragons in the stage. The only place where you might miss anything is down in this section by the water. There are a few paths for you to check out, but they aren't that deep, to be honest. It's not to say that this stage isn't fun though, because I still enjoyed it. Twilight Harbor is pretty interesting. Here you see enemies with actual guns, which I guess really adds to the idea that you're near the end of the game. As usual, I just had to keep my eyes peeled for any little platforms that might hold treasure. Like for example, this little ledge that has an extra life. You access it by running and launching off the supercharge ramp. Twilight Harbor also has one of the most fun containers to break. You once again need to use that supercharge to blast your way back through the level. After this, it was essentially a straightforward shot to the end of the stage, and we 100%ed Twilight Harbor. I was thrown off by this, but it was already time to fight the final boss of the game, the guy who started all of this havoc on the dragons, Gnasty Gnorc. His boss fight is honestly pretty fun. First, you need to chase these thieves that have keys that unlock the next parts of the level. The first key unlocks another path that you need to go and grab another key in, and then that section leads you to the Gnasty fight. In this fight, you need to dash after Gnasty and keep close in order to hit him to get to the next phase of the fight. After you hit him, he goes off into another path that really tests your platforming skills. You need to jump from platform to platform over lava, efficiently enough to keep up with Gnasty. At the end of this part, you hit him once more, and I got the achievement for defeating Gnasty, as well as 100%ing his level, and then the credits played. But that doesn't mean we're done yet. There are still a handful of achievements for us to get. What is supposed to be the last dragon in this game tells us that the final stage, Gnasty's loot, will unlock when we 100% every other level. And as you can see here, I was a little confused because I thought I had, but the last stage still wasn't opening up. That's when I finally noticed. Magic crafters. I was missing Alpine Ridge. So I went back to collect Alpine Ridge's 4 dragons, 500 gems, and dragon egg. And to be honest, this stage isn't much to write home about at this point. We have had far harder levels and far more interesting level themes by now, so it was a breeze to get through. I do like the dinosaurs though, they're cool. Once I floated to this little section here, I was finally able to collect the last dragon egg and the last gem in the stage. After leaving Alpine Ridge, I could go back to Gnasty's world, where Gnasty's loot finally opened up. And this is an insanely grand level with 2,000 gems to collect. Here you can fly as much as you want, which I didn't catch on to at first. And you need to reach higher and higher parts of the stage in order to fly up that high. As you go around, there are a bunch of keys to collect, which open new sections, allowing you to fly higher. There are chasing challenges like this one through the lava area and getting the key from this thief. There are also fireworks to set off for more gems. It really ends up being an awesome final level to the game. Once you get the final key, you can get access to Gnasty's treasure room, which has a ton of treasure to grab, 1,100 total to be exact. Once you leave the treasure room, you get the alternate ending to the game and the credits roll once more. But although I have done everything this game has to offer, getting the 120% mark in my inventory, as an achievement hunter, I'm not quite done yet. I still have 13 more achievements to tackle before I've mastered this set. And this can be broken down into 3 categories: flight speedrun challenges, boss challenges, and then this achievement that gets its own category because I missed a secret platform. I started off with the speedrun challenges, and for these 4, I'm going to do a little montage. I need to go into each flying level and beat the stage 100% in under a certain time frame. Now that I'm done with that, I went on to start with the no-hit challenges. Essentially, each boss stage had a no-hit run or speedrun challenge attached to it. For Toasty, I needed to beat the entire stage from start to end without getting hit or waking up dogs. This meant being really careful around the start of this level leading up to the fight, and then avoiding waking up the dogs during it, which I did by making circles around the battle arena. This one became tough because the last 3 dogs are easy to wake, but after a few tries, I got it done. Then, I needed to beat Dr. Shemp's stage without getting hit, which was easy to do. He's not very hard at all. I guess you do need to be careful on this attack. It got me hit once. It comes out very fast. After that, I needed to get to the end of Blowhard's level in under 30 seconds, which is incredibly easy because of this breeze thing that basically takes you to the end of the level. This next one is interesting, because it isn't boss related, but I needed to make it through Terrace Village without taking any damage, which is easier said than done. The electric floors really can get in your way, as well as these tank guys. I ended up just ramming my way through the start and then getting super careful around here. I took my time to get to the end of the stage. Then I had to beat Metalhead without getting hit. Not really anything interesting at all. Just don't get hit, bozo. After that, I need to beat Jake's without shooting fire more than 3 times, which is a dumb achievement considering it only takes 3 hits. I really don't know how I missed this one on the first run through. And then I had an actual hard achievement to do. Once again, I needed to play a normal level, Twilight Harbor, without getting hit. And that's because the enemies in this stage can be pretty darn accurate with their weapons. I will say this one took me a while. I really needed to figure out my path and sort of get lucky that they would miss me sometimes. This one took me a bit to get. Now that that was done, I only have one more achievement left in the entire set. It's time to take on Gnasty one last time. And this time, I need to beat him in under a minute and 55 seconds. Once I familiarized myself with the path I needed to take in this stage, it was honestly simple. Get key 1, get key 2, run through the stage and hit Gnasty on your first go, and then try to get through the lava section as fast as you can to hit Gnasty for the last time. I ended up getting it on my second try with a time around 1 minute and 46 seconds. And with that, I've mastered the Spyro achievement set. I'll say that I'm overall happy with the Spyro experience. I do wish that the set had some more challenges to do, as most of it is just completion based. I'd love to see a subset in the future that has some really tough challenges to get through. I would totally give it a try. And hey, if you've made it all the way to the end of this video, drop a like and sub. I know I begged earlier, but I love seeing support on these videos. And if you're at all interested, go and check out my Twitch. I sometimes stream there. Thank you all so much for watching, and next time, I think I have a pretty fun game I'm gonna check out.